You wake up one morning and you swing your legs off the side of the bed, and before your feet even touch the floor, you feel it, that deep, dull ache in your hip that wasn't there 5 years ago. Or maybe it was there, just quieter. You stand up and your knees pop like bubble wrap, and you think, well, this is just what happens. This is just aging. And then you pour your coffee and you see that bottle of calcium on the counter, the one your doctor told you to take. And you wonder why, after all these pills, after all these years, your bones still feel like they're made of chalk. Here's what nobody told you. Calcium pills are not the answer. They never were the whole answer. And I'm going to show you why today, because when you look at the skeletal remains and the health records of Native American elders, particularly from the Plains Nations, the Southwest Pueblos, and the Pacific Northwest coastal tribes, you find something that stops researchers in their tracks. These people had bones that were denser, stronger, and more fracture-resistant than almost any population we've studied, and they didn't have calcium supplements. They didn't have vitamin D drops. They didn't have DEXA scans. What they had was food. Specific food, prepared in specific ways, eaten in specific combinations that modern science is only now beginning to understand. My name is Margaret, and I've spent years researching the intersection of ancestral nutrition and modern bone science. I'm not a doctor, and nothing I share today is medical advice. What I am is someone who reads the studies, talks to the researchers, visits the communities that still remember these traditions, and then sits down with you to explain what I've found. And what I've found about bone health has completely changed how I think about aging. So before we get into this, do me a favor. If you've ever been told you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, or if you've ever broken a bone after age 50 from something that shouldn't have broken a bone, like stepping off a curb or catching yourself on a countertop, tell me in the comments. Tell me your age and when it happened. I want to understand who's watching this, because this information is specifically for you. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button. I put out research like this every single week, and I promise you, the next video is going to connect to everything we talk about today in a way that will surprise you. Now let me explain what's actually happening inside your bones right now, because this is the part your doctor doesn't have time to tell you. Your bones are not solid like a rock. They're alive. They're more like a construction site that never closes. You have two crews working around the clock. One crew is called osteoclasts, and their job is demolition. They break down old bone. The other crew is called osteoblasts, and their job is construction. They build new bone. When you're young, the construction crew works faster than the demolition crew. Your bones get denser, stronger, thicker. Somewhere around age 35, that flips. The demolition crew starts outpacing the construction crew. And by the time you're 60, 65, 70, you can be losing 1 to 2% of your bone density every single year. Now here's what the standard approach misses. Your doctor says take calcium and vitamin D, and those are important. I'm not dismissing that. But calcium is just one raw material. It's like delivering bricks to a construction site that has no workers, no foreman, no blueprint. If you don't have the other nutrients that tell your body where to put that calcium, how to crystallize it into actual bone matrix, and how to slow down the demolition crew, those calcium pills are going to end up in your arteries, in your kidneys, anywhere but your bones. That's not a scare tactic, that's published research. And this is where these 5 ancient foods come in, because every single one of them addresses a different part of that equation that calcium alone cannot touch. The Native American elders didn't know the biochemistry, but they knew the food, and the food knew the biochemistry. The first food is bone broth made from large animal joints, and I don't mean the kind you buy in a carton at the grocery store. I mean the real thing. The kind that was simmered for a full day in a clay pot over low fire until the liquid turned thick and gelatinous, and the bones crumbled when you pressed them with a wooden spoon. Among the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Crow, and virtually every Plains nation, bone broth wasn't a recipe. It was a medical practice. When an elder's joints stiffened, they were given broth. When a woman gave birth, she was given broth. When a warrior came back from a hunt with injuries, the first thing the women prepared was broth. And not just any broth. They used the knuckle joints, the feet, the vertebral column, the parts that had the most cartilage, the most connective tissue, the most marrow. They cracked the long bones open with stones and dropped the marrow directly into the simmering water. The liquid that resulted was so thick that when it cooled, you could turn the bowl upside down and it wouldn't fall out. That gel, that wobble, that sticky, golden liquid with circles of fat floating on the surface and a smell that filled the entire camp, that was medicine. And here's what science now tells us is in that gel. First, you have collagen, specifically type 1 and type 2 collagen, which are the primary structural proteins of bone and cartilage. Your bone is not just mineral, it's roughly 50% collagen by volume. The mineral gives hardness, the collagen gives flexibility. A bone without enough collagen is like a piece of chalk, hard but brittle. It snaps. A bone with adequate collagen is like a green branch. It bends before it breaks. A study published in the journal Nutrients found that collagen peptide supplementation at doses of 5 to 10 grams per day significantly increased bone mineral density in postmenopausal women over 12 months. That's what's in that broth. Second, you have glycosaminoglycans, including chondroitin sulfate and hyaluronic acid, which are extracted from the cartilage during long cooking. These compounds don't just help your joints. They signal your osteoblasts, your bone-building cells, to increase their activity. Third, you have bioavailable minerals, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, pulled directly from the bone into the liquid, in forms your body actually recognizes and absorbs, unlike many supplements. Now here's the practical part, and I want you to listen carefully because most people get this wrong. Buy beef knuckle bones or oxtails from a butcher. You want joints, not just marrow bones. Put 2 to 3 pounds in a large pot, cover with cold water, add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. This is critical because the acidity pulls the minerals out of the bone, and bring it to a gentle simmer. Not a rolling boil, a simmer. Let it go for 18 to 24 hours. When it cools, it should jiggle like gelatin. Drink 1 cup every morning, warm, with a pinch of sea salt. If you don't want to make it yourself, look for brands that gel when refrigerated. If it doesn't gel, it wasn't cooked long enough and you're getting flavored water, not bone broth. The second food is dried fish with edible bones, and this one has a history that goes back thousands of years along the rivers and coastlines of this continent. The salmon runs of the Pacific Northwest were not just an ecological event. They were the backbone, and I use that word deliberately, of the health of nations like the Chinook, the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Nez Perce. When the salmon came, entire communities moved to the rivers. They caught thousands of fish. They smoked them, dried them, pounded them. And here's the detail that matters for your bones. They ate the whole fish. They didn't fillet it and throw the skeleton away the way we do. They dried small fish whole. They pounded dried salmon into a powder that included the bones, the skin, the fins. They mixed this powder with rendered fat and dried berries to make pemmican, a concentrated food that sustained them through winter months when fresh food was scarce. Anthropological studies of skeletal remains from these coastal populations show remarkably low rates of osteoporosis compared to European populations of the same era. And when you look at the nutritional profile of what they were eating, it makes perfect sense. A single serving of small fish eaten with bones, like sardines or smelt or dried anchovies, contains more bioavailable calcium than a glass of milk. I need you to hear that again. More bioavailable calcium than a glass of milk, and it comes packaged with vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and phosphorus, all of which your body needs to actually incorporate that calcium into bone. The omega-3 connection is particularly important, and almost nobody talks about it in the context of bone health. A study from Ohio State University found that a higher ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids in the diet was associated with significantly greater bone mineral density in the hip. The mechanism is inflammation. Omega-6 fatty acids, which dominate the modern diet through seed oils and processed food, promote the activity of osteoclasts, your demolition crew. Omega-3s suppress them. So every time you eat a piece of salmon with the bones, you're delivering calcium and telling your body to stop tearing down the bone you already have. That's a two-pronged approach that no supplement can replicate in quite the same way. Here's what I want you to do. 2 to 3 times per week, eat a can of sardines with the bones in. I know. Some of you just made a face. But hear me out. Get the ones packed in olive oil, put them on a piece of toasted sourdough bread with a squeeze of lemon and some thinly sliced red onion. It's actually delicious once you get past the idea of it. The bones are soft. You won't even notice them. Each can gives you roughly 350 milligrams of calcium, about 100% of your vitamin D needs, and a solid dose of EPA and DHA. If you absolutely cannot do sardines, canned wild salmon with bones is your next best option. Eat the bones. They're soft. Mash them with a fork. That is the whole point. And by the way, pay close attention to the third food on this list, because it's the one that surprised me the most in my research, and it's the one almost nobody is talking about. The third food is sunflower seeds, and specifically the way they were traditionally processed and eaten by tribes of the Great Plains and the Southwest. Now you might be thinking, sunflower seeds? For bones? But stay with me, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Sunflowers are native to North America. They were one of the first crops deliberately cultivated on this continent, predating corn in many regions. The Hopi, the Hidatsa, the Arikara, and many other nations grew sunflower gardens and considered them a staple, not a snack. The seeds were ground into meal using stone mortars, mixed into cakes, pressed for oil, and stirred into soups and stews. The Hidatsa women in particular had elaborate sunflower gardens along the Missouri River, and the harvest and processing of sunflower seeds was a major communal activity that lasted weeks. What's in sunflower seeds that matters for your bones? Magnesium. And this is the mineral that almost everyone over 55 is deficient in, and almost nobody is supplementing correctly. Roughly 60% of the magnesium in your body is stored in your bones. It's not optional, it's structural. Magnesium is required for the conversion of vitamin D into its active form, and without active vitamin D, you cannot absorb calcium from your gut. Read that again. Without magnesium, your vitamin D doesn't work. And without working vitamin D, your calcium doesn't get absorbed. You can take all the calcium and vitamin D pills you want, but if your magnesium is low, you're building on sand. A study from the University of Tennessee found that magnesium intake was independently and significantly associated with bone mineral density in both men and women, even after controlling for calcium and vitamin D intake. Another study in the European Journal of Epidemiology followed over 73,000 postmenopausal women and found that those with the highest magnesium intake had a significantly lower risk of fractures. This is not fringe science. This is mainstream research that somehow hasn't made it into the conversation your doctor has with you. Sunflower seeds are also rich in copper, manganese, and selenium, three trace minerals that serve as cofactors for enzymes involved in collagen cross-linking, the process that makes your collagen fibers strong and resilient instead of weak and brittle. It's like the difference between a rope where the strands are tightly woven together and a rope where the strands are just loosely bundled. Same material, completely different strength. Those trace minerals do the weaving. Here's your action step. Get raw, unsalted, shelled sunflower seeds. Eat a quarter cup every day. I like to put them on salads, stir them into oatmeal, or just eat them by the handful as an afternoon snack. A quarter cup gives you roughly 28% of your daily magnesium, 75% of your vitamin E, and significant amounts of copper and manganese. One important note. Don't roast them at high temperatures because heat damages the vitamin E and reduces the bioavailability of some minerals. If you like them warm, toast them gently in a dry pan on medium-low heat for just a few minutes until they turn slightly golden and your kitchen smells nutty and warm, like the wood-fired kitchens where Hidatsa women once processed these same seeds on autumn afternoons along the river. The fourth food is stinging nettle. And this is the one that connects the Native American tradition to something much older and much wider than any single culture. Almost every traditional culture on Earth used stinging nettle. In North America, the Cherokee, the Ojibwe, the Iroquois, and dozens of other nations used nettle extensively, but not just for food. It was medicine, fiber, and dye. The young spring shoots were gathered when they were tender, usually in April or May, before the plant grew tall and tough. The women who gathered them knew to use leather wraps on their hands because the tiny hairs on the stems and leaves inject formic acid into the skin on contact, creating that sharp, burning sting that gives the plant its name. But once you cook nettle, even briefly, those stinging hairs collapse and become completely harmless. And what's left is one of the most mineral-dense greens that exists on this planet. Here's what's in a cup of cooked nettle leaves. Over 400 milligrams of calcium. Let that sink in. That's more calcium than a glass and a half of milk in a single cup of greens. But it doesn't stop there. You also get significant magnesium, silicon, boron, and vitamin K1. Now I need to talk about vitamin K and boron for a moment because these two nutrients are absolutely critical for bone health and almost nobody knows about them. Vitamin K1 is required for the activation of a protein called osteocalcin. Osteocalcin is produced by your osteoblasts, your bone-building cells, but it's produced in an inactive form. It just sits there, doing nothing, until vitamin K comes along and activates it through a process called carboxylation. Once activated, osteocalcin grabs calcium from your blood and deposits it directly into your bone matrix. Without adequate vitamin K, you have inactive osteocalcin floating around, calcium circulating in your blood with nowhere to go, and bones that are starving for minerals they can't capture. A landmark study from Tufts University followed over 70,000 women and found that those with the lowest vitamin K intake had a 30% higher risk of hip fracture. Boron, the other mineral in nettle, plays a different but equally important role. It reduces the urinary excretion of calcium and magnesium, meaning it helps your body hold on to the minerals you already have instead of flushing them out. It also supports the metabolism of vitamin D and has been shown to increase estrogen levels in postmenopausal women, which matters because estrogen is one of the primary hormones that keeps the demolition crew, the osteoclasts, in check. If you told me I could only recommend one green for bone health for the rest of my life, it would be stinging nettle. No contest. The easiest way to get it is as a dried tea. You can buy organic dried nettle leaves online or at any health food store. Put 1 tablespoon of dried nettle in a mason jar, pour boiling water over it, cap it, and let it steep for at least 4 hours, ideally overnight. What you get the next morning is a dark green, earthy, mineral-rich infusion that tastes like the forest floor in the best possible way. Drink 1 to 2 cups per day. You can add a little honey or lemon if you like. If you have access to fresh nettles, blanch them for 60 seconds in boiling water, drain, and use them anywhere you'd use cooked spinach. They're mild, slightly sweet, and pair beautifully with eggs, soups, or rice dishes. Some farmers markets carry them in spring, and if you're in a rural area, they probably grow wild within walking distance of your house. If you're finding this useful, take a second and share this video with someone you love who's worried about their bones, a sister, a friend, a spouse. This information could genuinely change how they age. And let me know in the comments which of these foods you've actually tried before. I bet some of you have grandmothers who drank nettle tea and you never knew why. The fifth and final food is acorn flour, and I saved this one for last because it represents a food tradition so vast, so central to Native American life, and so thoroughly erased from modern memory that most Americans don't even know acorns are edible. Before European contact, acorns were arguably the single most important plant food on the North American continent. The Miwok, the Pomo, the Yurok, the Cherokee, the Lenape, and hundreds of other nations relied on acorns as a primary calorie source. In California alone, where oak woodlands stretched across millions of acres, acorns were to indigenous people what wheat is to modern Americans. They were gathered in enormous quantities in the fall, dried, shelled, and then processed through a careful leaching technique that removed the bitter tannins. The shelled nuts were ground into a fine flour using stone mortars, some of which were used so long that they wore deep bowl-shaped depressions into solid granite that you can still see today in the Sierra Nevada foothills. Then the flour was placed in a sand basin or a woven basket and cold water was poured through it again and again, sometimes for hours, until the bitterness was completely gone. What remained was a smooth, sweet, nutty flour that was made into porridge, flatbread, and soup. Why does this matter for your bones? Because acorn flour has a nutritional profile that reads like it was designed by a bone scientist. It's high in calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus in a ratio that closely mirrors the mineral composition of bone itself. That ratio matters enormously. When calcium and phosphorus are present in roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, absorption and utilization are optimized. Most modern diets have a wildly skewed calcium to phosphorus ratio because of all the phosphoric acid in soft drinks and processed food, which actually pulls calcium out of bone. Acorn flour delivers these minerals in balance, but the real star of acorn flour for bone health might be manganese. A quarter cup of acorn flour contains nearly a full day's worth of manganese, a trace mineral that most people have never thought about. Manganese is a cofactor for an enzyme called glycosyltransferase, which is essential for the synthesis of proteoglycans, the molecules that form the scaffolding onto which bone minerals are deposited. Think of proteoglycans as the rebar in a concrete building. Without the rebar, you can pour all the concrete you want, but the structure will be weak and prone to cracking. A study from the University of California found that manganese deficiency in animal models led to significantly impaired bone formation and increased fragility, and population studies have shown that people with higher manganese intake tend to have greater bone density. Now, I want to be honest with you. Acorn flour is not easy to find commercially, and making it from scratch is a labor-intensive process, but it is available. Several small producers, many of them Native American-owned, sell properly leached acorn flour online. You can also find it at some specialty food stores and farmers markets in California and the Pacific Northwest. If you can get your hands on it, use it to replace a quarter to a third of the regular flour in pancakes, muffins, or flatbread. It has a warm, slightly sweet, nutty flavor that's unlike anything else. You can also stir it into oatmeal or porridge for a mineral boost. If acorn flour is genuinely unavailable to you, the closest nutritional parallel would be almond flour, combined with a manganese-rich food like pecans, though the mineral ratios won't be as perfectly balanced. I want to tell you about a woman named Ruth. Ruth is 68 years old, a retired school librarian from northern New Mexico. 2 years ago, her DEXA scan came back with a diagnosis of osteoporosis in her lumbar spine and osteopenia in her left hip. Her doctor prescribed a bisphosphonate medication, and Ruth started taking it, but she also started asking questions. She came from a family that had deep roots in the Southwest, and she remembered her grandmother, a woman of mixed Pueblo and Spanish heritage, who lived to 94 and never broke a bone in her life. Her grandmother made bone broth from beef and goat bones every single week. She gathered wild greens, including nettles, from the acequias in spring. She ate sardines from a tin with saltine crackers almost every afternoon. She ground sunflower seeds into a paste that she spread on corn tortillas. Ruth started doing research. She found the studies on collagen and bone density. She found the magnesium data. She found the vitamin K connection. And she started rebuilding her grandmother's kitchen, not out of nostalgia, but out of science. She made bone broth on Sundays and drank a cup every morning. She ate sardines 3 times a week. She added a quarter cup of sunflower seeds to her daily routine. She started drinking nettle tea every afternoon. She found a source for acorn flour and started making a simple flatbread with it once a week. She didn't stop her medication. She didn't change her prescription without talking to her doctor. She added food. That's all. 18 months later, her follow-up DEXA scan showed a 4.2% increase in bone mineral density in her lumbar spine. Her doctor was surprised. Ruth wasn't. She'd seen her grandmother's hands, brown and strong and steady at 90, cracking sunflower seeds on a summer evening. She'd known in some wordless way that the food was doing something. Now she had the numbers to prove it. Now I need to say something important before we wrap up, and I need you to take this seriously. If you are currently taking any medication, especially bisphosphonates like alendronate or risdronate, blood thinners like warfarin, thyroid medication, or any hormone therapy, do not make dietary changes without talking to your doctor first. Some of these foods, particularly nettle and high vitamin K greens, can interact with blood thinners. Bone broth can be high in certain amino acids that may affect people with specific kidney conditions. Sardines are high in purines, which matter if you have gout. None of these foods are dangerous for most people, but your situation is unique. Your medications are specific, and your doctor needs to know what you're adding so they can monitor you appropriately. This is not about going around your doctor. This is about bringing your doctor better information so you can work together. Here's what I want you to take away from everything we talked about today. Every single one of these 5 foods does the same fundamental thing from a different angle. They don't just deliver calcium. They deliver the entire ecosystem that bone needs to rebuild, the collagen that gives bone its flexibility, the magnesium that activates your vitamin D, the vitamin K that turns on the protein that puts calcium where it belongs, the omega-3s that tell the demolition crew to slow down, the manganese and trace minerals that build the scaffolding. The Native American elders who ate this way didn't have a word for osteoporosis because they didn't need one. Their food was doing the work that our supplements are failing to do, not because supplements are useless, but because you can't replace a symphony with a single instrument. Here's your plan. Start this week. You don't have to do everything at once. Step 1. Make or buy real bone broth that gels when cold and drink 1 cup every morning. Step 2. Eat sardines or canned wild salmon with bones twice a week. Step 3. Add a 1/4 cup of raw sunflower seeds to your daily routine, on salads, in oatmeal, or by the handful. Step 4. Start drinking nettle tea, 1 strong cup per day, steeped for at least 4 hours. Step 5. If you can find acorn flour, experiment with it once a week in place of some regular flour. Do this consistently for 90 days. Talk to your doctor, get your follow-up scan, and then come back and tell me what happened. I genuinely want to know. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk about something that connects directly to everything we covered today, and it's a topic that I think is even more important. We're going to look at the 5 specific things that are destroying your bones right now that you're probably doing every single day without knowing it. And one of them, I'll give you a hint, is something that most people consider a healthy habit. That video is going to change how you think about your morning routine. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.